always put yourself in the customer's shoes or just out of your own world of being a pricing professional and try and think about it differently. And maybe you'll come to the same conclusion, or maybe you'll have an epiphany and think about things totally differently. Letting go of your assumptions and your conviction of being right about how you're doing things today is a really powerful tool.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the amazing relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and today our guest is Alex Shartsis. Here are 3 things you want to know about Alex before we start. He is co-founder and CEO of Perfect Price, a company that uses artificial intelligence for price and revenue management. And that's what I'm especially excited to learn about today. He wrote a book called The Ultimate Guide to Pricing Strategy, a playbook for behavior-based pricing and promotions. I'll bet a lot of that has to do with his company. And Alex was invited to be a member of the Forbes Technology Council. What an amazing honor. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Hey, as I read through your LinkedIn page, your background doesn't scream pricing at me. Most people I talk to, it's pricing, pricing, pricing. How did you get into pricing?
It's a great question. I think if you'd asked me when I graduated from college, would I be running a pricing company, I would have looked at you sideways like you were crazy. But I've worked for early stage technology companies my whole career. And after business school, that's been my focus, is bringing new technologies to market. And everywhere I've had to deal with really big pricing challenges. And so I've been able to create a lot of value through pricing. And when my co-founder and I got together and we're talking about ideas to use the technology we were familiar with and bring them to market in a new way, pricing was just an obvious choice.
Oh, that's pretty neat. You essentially said, look, I've had to deal with pricing my entire career. I have this really cool technology. What if we put them together and we can solve this amazing problem?
Yeah, that's exactly it. A lot of the challenge with pricing in many companies is, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but I'm sure some of your listeners will empathize, it's either a second thought or it's people just lack the tools, right? They don't know how to price the value because they don't know what the value is. That's what our technology was really good at figuring out. And so that's why we thought this would be a great area to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's actually a third or fourth thought. It's certainly it's the last thought that goes through their mind before they launch a product most of the time. So yeah. Sad. When you say the technology, I assume we're talking AI.
AI has gotten a lot of marketing buzz around it. We talk about it as AI, and AI is a good way to think about it. But really, fundamentally, what we do, the actual underlying technology is a lot of supervised machine learning and other AI techniques, and combined with a SaaS, software as a service delivery platform.
Yep. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm excited. But before I jump into the technical side, let's just talk about this concept of dynamic pricing, because everything I read about your company, you're pushing dynamic pricing. Is that the main piece of pricing you focus on? Is that just what your technology really helps well with?
Yeah, so a bit of both, I think. I mean, if we were having this conversation, say, 15 years from now, and we're looking back on 2019 and how people ran their companies, in 2030 or 2040, you're not using people to set up hundreds of rules to price things. You're not downloading things into Excel, right? That just isn't, if you think about the future, a lot of this is done by AI, by machines, just as it's done today by some of the leading companies, Amazon, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb. There's a huge list of innovative companies that are using AI to do pricing already. And I think if you think in the future, let's look back. Yeah, I mean, why would you publish a price list in January? Just give me one good reason when everybody expects pricing to move around based on demand. So I'm sure there'll be a few industries that hold out. GE and Rolls-Royce will still be selling jet engines based on a January price list. But the vast majority of things, especially the consumers buy, the price will just reflect demand. And as a result of that, we focus our technology on dynamic pricing because that's what we think our customers have said that they really need. And that's where we think the world is going, where, sellers are going for many things, not everything, but for many things where demand fluctuates and supply fluctuates, the consumer expects the price to reflect that fluctuation, and the company is much better served by capturing that value.
Can you just list a few examples of things that we would all be familiar with that say, oh, here's dynamic pricing? Obviously, surge pricing with Uber.
Yeah, surge pricing with Uber is a good example. I think another good example is car rentals. Everybody's gone and rented a car, or many people have rented a car, stayed in a hotel. But it goes deeper than that. So, an example that really surprised me was a car manufacturer. So think about, do you enjoy buying a car? Right? Who enjoys going to a dealership and haggling? And a lot of the car manufacturers are realizing that if they can accurately price the car, they could sell cars online. Right. And so Tesla has been a big change agent in the car industry, and other companies that have come to us that said, okay, well, now we have a global operation. We now need to centralize control of pricing in, say, Germany, right, or Detroit. I don't know what's going on in Indonesia or Japan or all these other markets, but they're all looking to corporate to figure out pricing globally. And it turns out pricing for cars changes day to day. Demand for cars changes seasonally. It changes based on a bunch of different factors. And using our technology, they can actually capture that, like understand the demand for their products on a very granular basis around the world, and then adjust prices accordingly in near real time, so that when you take away that sales negotiation, you're still able to capture the value from the customer, right? You're not going to sell out of cars, and you're going to capture the value.
I got to tell you, Alex, from a consumer perspective, I now hate you.
Well, it's funny. I think that's, and maybe we can all thank Uber for that. I think the reality is that a lot of cars are that you're wasting your time, right? The dealership wants an extra $5,000 for the car, $3,000 for the car, because that's their margin, more than it's actually worth in the market. So they're going to make you go in there and sit in an uncomfortable chair for the better part of a Saturday, just to squeeze out that $2,000, and they'll probably still get $500 the car isn't worth. Whereas if, say, Toyota or Subaru or Nissan actually priced the car accurately to begin with, and you went in and for your market, for that car, you get a price that's actually a fair price, it makes the car buying experience better. And by the way, this is already happening. CarMax sells used cars with the no haggle price. Shift, which is a startup here in San Francisco, basically sells cars online, and there's no haggling. So there's precedent for it, and consumers really like it. Both of those companies have really happy customers, and you go look at the Yelp reviews of your average Toyota dealership, they're not so positive.
Yeah, I think it's very fair that says you're going to save me a Saturday, but what you're now causing me to do, just like I do when I buy airplane tickets, well, should I buy it on Tuesday or on Saturday? Should I buy it 6 weeks ahead or 2 weeks ahead? And now I got to do the same thing when I buy a car.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you're not doing that now, you're losing a lot of money on buying a car.
Well, before I was
the price has already changed. If you go in on the first of the month, you're going to pay more than if you went on the 30th.
That's a true statement.
If you're not doing that now, you're leaving even more money on the table than you would be if it were more dynamic.
Ignorance really is bliss at times.
Yeah, don't hate me. Don't hate the player. Hate the game.
Okay, so when we think about dynamic pricing, most examples I think of are usually demand-based. Is it ever something else? So if I were, I do the Memorial Day sale at Macy's. Is that dynamic pricing the way you think of it? Or is that just we do a sale once in a while?
The Memorial Day sale is more of a promotion, I would say, than a dynamic price. Now, I would argue that Macy's doesn't have a lot of science behind what promotions they offer. They just think, 40% off will drive traffic to the store. And you could put a lot more science behind that. Our technology can actually do a lot in terms of simulating what will happen and giving people insights, the pricing team or the promotions team insights into how effective something's going to be. But to me, dynamic pricing is really your everyday price. And so the two ways to get there are demand-based pricing. So what is this value to the buyer or the customer? What is somebody willing to pay for a Toyota Camry with these features, in Detroit or in, whatever city that is. And then the other side of it is, well, what else is going on in the market? So, there are times where knowing what your competition's doing is important. And that, the rental car industry is a good example of that. There are times where even if people are willing to pay $30 a day to rent a car from you in that particular location, if everybody else is renting the same car for 15, you're not going to rent that many cars for 30. You might rent some, but you're not going to rent that many. And so it depends. Your dynamic price needs to take into account not only demand, supply, but also what else is going on in that market.
How's the podcast going? Are you getting value? Research shows that people don't really value what they get for free. But I'm hoping you'll prove this research wrong. Please demonstrate to us and the entire world that you value this podcast. Would you please pause the podcast, subscribe if you haven't already done so, rate the podcast, and leave us a short review? You'd be doing a huge favor. And research shows if you invest this little bit of time, you'll probably like the podcast even more. Win-win. Pause, do it now. We'll wait for you. I could kind of think of dynamic pricing as having two sides to it. One side is what's going on in the marketplace. And so I'm trying to estimate your willingness to pay. It's a special event. Of course, you're going to come to the Super Bowl. You're willing to pay more to be there. I get that. The other side is it isn't necessarily that I've got people who are willing to pay more, or I'm sorry, that somebody is willing to pay more. It's really the fact that I have this huge range of buyers and I only have so much supply. Therefore, I'm going to take the top set of buyers only and just sell to them. Does that make sense?
That can be effective. I guess it's good that you're doing something and nothing in that example. But I think that what traditionally operations research methods have approached revenue management. The traditional approach is having different buckets and saying, oh, well, these are my business travelers, right? Those are my higher value customers. And I'm going to, they're going to the Super Bowl and I'm going to charge them more because, I put them in this bucket. But the reality, especially in the travel industry, is the lines have gotten really, really blurry. You've got people vacationing, coming back on a Saturday to save a little money on the flight, maybe, or just because they have other obligations. You've got vacationers leaving on a Wednesday, which was traditionally not a day that people left for a vacation, and then working from wherever they're going. I know our team does that all the time just to save a little bit of money on the flight. So, it becomes, in that sense, it becomes much more about how are you framing the problem. And I think the key difference with AI is learning from the data as opposed to making a bunch of human understandable assumptions. So if people are willing to pay more on Fridays or willing to pay more on Wednesdays or willing to pay more 3 weeks before that event, great. Let's charge more then. Let's do that in the context of the whole event and how do we maximize our revenue from that event. But it's less of trying to fit human understandable assumptions into a price, arbitrary or otherwise. And so I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but I think it's a different way of looking at the problem.
Yes. And so you and your company, you gather a whole bunch of outside data that's not just the data that, let's talk about rental cars for a second, right? Rental car company obviously has tons of historical purchase data, but you're going to take more data on top of that and say, oh, these are things that predict demand or willingness to pay for a rental car. Is that true?
Yeah, so absolutely. So there are really a couple key components of data that we look at, and so one of them is absolutely those outside factors, and that could be the weather, it could be how many flights arrive, where those flights are coming from, how many seats are on them, how full they are. Right? There's a lot of really interesting outside data that can be applied to this, but the thing that's almost always overlooked by companies is their own data. Right? You've got either your actual purchase data, how many bookings do you have already, or how many transactions did you do in a related period 30 days ago or 28 days ago, last quarter, last year, whatever that right way to relate that is. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is, if you have web traffic data, right, how many people are searching for that on your website, or how many inquiries are you getting from other other sources, other agents, and a lot of the times, not a lot of the times, almost every company we talk to is just throwing that data out, right? If you think about the conversion data, especially, if your conversion rate on your website is 1 or 2%, which is good, especially for the travel industry, that means that you're just throwing out 98 or 99% of your data.
And it never hit me that says we could use web search data as predictors of demand. But it makes all the sense in the world. I just never thought of it.
Well, that's, we thought of it because we came from the online ad industry, and that's what's been really interesting is we just look at this problem differently. Another example, right? If you're a B2B company selling through your own website, right? So you have maybe sales reps who go around, but your customer puts in an order online. And this is increasingly the trend. I know McKesson, which is the biggest pharmaceutical medical distributor, their hospitals use a website to go order stuff, right? In the B2B context, a lot of people worry about losing sales to competition, right? How much of my customer's wallet do I have versus leakage, or however you want to put that.
Yep.
Well, if they went to your website and they priced something out and they didn't buy it, that's a sign that you don't have, if they're talking on the phone, right? No sales rep is good enough to put in an order that didn't happen, right? But if you filled out a form on the website that said, I want 15 of these and 2 of those and 7 of those, right? And then you go do it on the competitor's website, maybe they give you a better price and you never completed the purchase. That's data that you can use that a lot of companies just drop on the floor today.
Yeah, pretty fascinating. Pretty fast. Hey, can I run a really weird dynamic pricing situation by you, and maybe you can explain it to me?
Sure. I'll try.
It was probably I published a book in 2011, and it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Amazon had it for $250, where the book itself sold for $20. And I assumed because the publisher was out of stock, the reason for this was automatic pricing algorithms. And what I ended up doing was putting the book on Amazon myself for $20, and I just watched all those prices come back down towards my price. What was going on?
Yeah, I think you figured it out. So, so it could be a number of things. Again, this is highly speculative, but Amazon, and if it was a third-party seller especially, a lot of people use different software algorithms to price things on Amazon. I think one of the challenges with pricing, and you can run into this at any scale, and this might be what's going on, is if you have a low expected, if you're optimizing your price for expected value, so it's, the probability of a sale times the result of a sale, which is the price, you can optimize into a really high price because, 0.1 times $1 million is actually a pretty big number. And so that may be what happened. They thought, well, there isn't a lot of likelihood of a purchase, but if we get $220 for it, that's a good, we'd be happy with that. And that's the winning price versus say $20. And I think that you're putting your book out there for $20 shows the importance of the market, right? Oh, suddenly there's an alternative. Somebody could buy this for $20. Maybe we should lower the price.
I deluded myself into thinking those were all people who'd read the book and thought it was worth $250.
It could, well, I mean, it could have been that too. It depends on who the seller was. I think, it's a good example of why, in our opinion, whenever you're running an AI pricing strategy, you do need some human control over it. That said, that's like Googling yourself, right? That's your book. Whoever's selling that, if it's Amazon, is selling literally millions of books.
Right.
So, a lot of people, especially executives, they look at a pricing strategy. I get an example from our world. We work with a big a rental company in New Zealand. And when I talked to their CEO, when we rolled out the software, he was like, look, man, Christmas Eve pricing just doesn't look quite right. And this day in November, it doesn't look quite right. And I was like, oh, that's, we'll look into that. What about everything else? He's like, oh, the rest of it's fine. And so our AI had gotten 363 days right. And it was just 2 days that weren't quite right. And that's what executives just go to the problem. But
Yes.
If you get 363 days right and 2 days wrong, you're winning, right? And so, your book, if it's mispriced, it's just a good example of, yes, you need some oversight, but at the same time, in the aggregate, is that pricing strategy winning? I think Amazon seems to be doing pretty well.
Oh, absolutely. I just thought it was funny. So something I've never really known the answer to, and would you please help me? What is AI? What is machine learning?
Great question. So, and this is a question we get a lot. So if you think about AI, artificial intelligence is about computers and machines. We know them now as computers, but when the phrase was coined, it was machines being able to understand things for themselves without being explicitly told. And it's very broad. So it's everything from Google search and deep learning to what we do around supervised machine learning and understanding demand. There's a thing called natural language processing where you have machines trying to understand text. Google Translate's a good example where they're trying to take things in Japanese and turn them into English without being told this word means the, So I think translation is a good example because it's very tempting to say, oh, well, when you say, dog in English, that means chien in French or perro in Spanish, right? That's a rule where a human said, hey, this word means that. And what machine learning and artificial intelligence mean is that the machine can figure out that Pero and Shen mean dog without ever being told that that's what they mean. It can just look at enough examples and figure out that those two things mean the same. And I think when you think about it that way, when it's like, oh, it's able to raise the price on Saturday because demand is higher on Saturday. Nobody told it to raise the price on Saturday. Nobody told it Saturdays were important. It just figured out that if it raises the price on Saturday, it'll achieve its objective. That's really what AI is. Machine learning specifically is what I would describe as a subset of AI, and that's where you're training the machine either an unsupervised way where the machine just learns on its own, or in a supervised way. And the supervised way is where there's more human involvement, and you're telling it this is the objective you're going for, and you're giving it a data set that has examples of success. So a good example of that is chess. When the Go was unsupervised machine learning, the AlphaGo. Supervised machine learning with chess is, hey, here are games that this person won, right? So that's the outcome you want. Go look at all this data and figure out how to do that, right? That's the supervised machine learning approach.
So instead of teaching it the rules, you teach it to figure out the rules.
Exactly. So what people think, oh, well, Perfect Price has an algorithm. We have a lot more than one algorithm. Both, some are used at the same time, some are used differently. But one of the things we do is try and figure out what is the demand curve, right? What is the price elasticity? What is somebody willing to pay? Again, without you having to say, oh, Saturdays people pay more, right? We'll figure that out if it's in fact true. And we found a lot of companies, for whatever reason, have actually gotten that wrong. That they've done some research and they've thought that they've figured out that there's a premium associated with something, a product, a day, a time. It turns out that it just wasn't there. And then the other thing that it can do is it can then learn from a strategy. So it can learn, oh, if I raise price by this much, so when you're dealing with competitors, for example, people frequently think, okay, well, if I just knew what my competitor was going to do, right? And I'll just tell the machine to raise price by $1 because then my competitor won't react, or lower price by $1 because my competitor won't react. And AI can actually learn what is the optimal strategy. Go try and compete against these people and try and figure out what the optimal strategy is, and it'll figure it out.
And it may not be able to tell you how the competitor is going to respond, but it has all that in its internal working, so it can say, here's the optimum decision for you to make today.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and that's one of the big changes is, a lot of companies we talk to, they really want to know why. And why is a different question. You can calculate a probability of a competitor response, but that's a different problem than winning or whatever, achieving your objective in the strategy. Like, understanding if there's a 66% chance your competitor follows you if you move your price one way or the other doesn't get included in the algorithm is trying to figure out how to, win more market share or increase profitability.
Nice. Okay, so this is going to sound like I'm letting you be a sales pitch, but I'm really, really, really curious. Let's say that I am Hertz and I want to do business with Perfect Price. How do we do that?
That's a good question. So we're and not entirely hypothetical. So we're a SaaS company. So basically, at a high level, we operate on an annual license basis. So just like Salesforce or any of the other SaaS companies, it means that there's no setup you don't have to buy servers and put them in your company because some people still do that. And then and you don't have to manage the software or do anything with the software. We work with you to send your data to our system, which we make pretty straightforward. And we work with your team or integrators to do that. And then your team has a way to log in and manage the prices and decide what to do. And then I could go into more detail about what people actually do in the software, but there's a lot of functionality.
I think here are my real questions then. Are you going to come work with me and say, oh, let's make sure we get your web search data. Let's make sure we put in all of your historical purchase data. Right? You're going to help me say, this is the data we want.
No, so So in the beginning of this, we go and find all that data with you, and help you get it into the system in a way that's usable and productive. And so we do that. And then, yes, absolutely. That's something that we provide, because a lot of companies don't even know where to start, right? Like you were saying before, I didn't even know my web search data was useful, right? Like, so they didn't, now we got to go get it. And then it's probably not in a format that's all that useful to begin with. So we work with them to get it in a format so that it can be put to good use. And then, obviously we then enable them to push everything back into their system in an automated way.
Next thing is There's the external data, third-party data. As Hertz, I'm not tracking weather. I'm not tracking if the Super Bowl is in the city. Right? There's all these things that go on externally. How do you say, do you sell pieces of that, or do you just say, look, I use everything that I have access to?
Basically, our model on the outside data front is we work with you if you have the data, or we'll go get the data on your behalf and just manage it for you. There are a lot of providers of weather data. We work with a few of them. So, depending on what problem you're trying to solve, we'll work with you to figure out which one's the best one. We have events data on the platform already that we've either gone out and gotten, or we have other vendors who provide that. And so basically whatever you need is already there, ready to go. And it's a question of just taking it in steps, right? Let's start with the data that everybody thinks is the most valuable. Then let's add, incrementally more and more data to that so that you get the results that you want.
I'm geeking out. I'm loving this stuff.
Yeah, me too. It's fun that this gets to be my day job, although some people think I'm a nerd.
Yeah, I wonder why. Does it matter to you? I don't think it does. Does it matter to you if I'm a subscription business or a more traditional type business?
So it does a bit, and that's because subscription businesses, just from a technical standpoint, have a lot of trouble offering a lot of different subscription tiers. So I did pricing at a couple subscription businesses, and it's really challenging. But there's this implicit challenge where you're charging the same person's credit card every month, right? So you can't charge $30 this month and $35 next month and $24 the month after that. What you can't do, obviously, is test new subscribers, and there are right and wrong ways to do that. But generally, we don't work with businesses that are purely a subscription business, because it's just a different type of pricing problem. Where, I mean, to be honest, if you were running a subscription business, and you asked me for pricing advice, we'd have a conversation about offering more Goldilocks pricing, offering additional packages. There's a lot you can do with pricing that isn't just changing that one product's price. We work with companies that sell a good number of products a lot of different ways. So, you think about a hotel where you could rent any number of nights in a room across 20 different kinds of room, across possibly thousands of properties, right? That's where our technology is much better, because you may remember that you paid $200 a night to stay at a Hilton in Los Angeles the last time you were there. But when you go this time, you fully expect not to pay $200 a night again, right? You're not. Whereas if you paid $40 for the Wall Street Journal last year, you expect to pay $40 this year. And if it were suddenly something different, you might take note.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And if I make the conclusion from what you just said, I think you said it is hard to do dynamic pricing for subscription companies.
Yes, I think to generalize even further, it's hard to do dynamic pricing for anything where the consumer or buyer really has a solid expectation of price. And so that can be subscriptions. It could also be milk and eggs. If you buy milk every 3 days, you know what it costs. And unless you can justify that price increase or decrease, it's dynamic pricing may not be right for that particular product.
Yep. Okay, that was brilliant. One more piece of brilliance. We've got to wrap this up though, Alec. Final question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think would have a big impact on their business?
Yeah, it's a great question. You sent it to me before, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days. To me, one of the things that I would really encourage people to do is to be really open-minded about their pricing. Having priced my own company's software and other companies' software, as well as other products, I think it's just really easy to get emotionally attached to the way you've been doing things. And I'm not trying to sell you AI software here. I'm just trying to say, think about, always put yourself in the customer's shoes, or just out of your own world of being a pricing professional, and try and think about it differently. And maybe you'll come to the same conclusion, or maybe you'll have an epiphany and think about things totally differently. But we did that once, and it was transformational for our business. And we've seen other companies do that regardless of whether or not they use our software. And it just letting go of your assumptions and your conviction of being right about how you're doing things today is a really powerful tool.
I think that was very well said. It is so often that we start down some path for whatever reason. It's easy as a startup company. We price it this way. And that's mostly internally focused, not externally focused. And as soon as we step back and start thinking about customers and willingness to pay and how it changes and situations, boy, suddenly we have so many more doors, so many more levers we can pull. So
yeah, exactly.
Nicely done. Alex, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Well, I'd be happy to hear from you. I'm on LinkedIn. Alex Shartsis. There's only one of me, and also on Twitter at The Generalist. And then our company, of course, you can reach me there. It's perfectprice.com.
Perfect. And we'll also have that in the show notes so people can find it easily. There went episode 21. All right. I learned a ton, and I actually was able to organize a bunch of thoughts in my mind, at least a little bit, around dynamic pricing and AI. I have to say my favorite part was learning that I could have used web data to help me figure out prices. Demand. How stupid. What was your favorite part? Please let us know in the comments or wherever you downloaded and listened. And while you're at it, would you please give us a 5-star review? We would greatly appreciate it. Also, if your B2B company needs to better understand subscription value and pricing, check out our new course. Although I hate bragging, I'm going to tell you it's amazing. You may already know a lot about running a subscription business, but this course will give you valuable frameworks, new tactics, and even a pricing roadmap template. If you'd like to learn more about the course or have any suggestions or comments about the podcast, please drop me a note at mark@impactpricing.com. As always, don't forget to listen next week to another episode of Impact Pricing.